So in Parsha Vayishlach, we have this classic confrontation between Yaakov and Esav, and Farshim explained that this certainly had dramatic implications. I guess the highlight of that, or the climax of that in this week's Parsha, was the sort of that wrestling match between the Sar Shel Esav and Yaakov Avinu. But right at the beginning of the Parsha, there's the physical confrontation between Esav and his armies and Yaakov and his families. And the pasuk says, "Vayir Yaakov mi'od, vayetzelo." So there's really interesting expression of Vayir Yaakov mi'od, because obviously we know that the person needs to have bitachon. We know that Yaakov obviously was completely reliant on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was a credible person, one of the Avos, in the sense of Bechir Shabavos. He was seen as, in a certain way, the greatest of the Avos. So what says Vayir Yaakov Mod? HaKadosh Baruch Hu had promised him that things were going to be okay, and yet there's a great fear. So just the Daza came in again, the different answers in terms of using up the chasadim, but Daza came in particular on this pasuk. Vayir Yaakov Miod mentions two things that Yaakov was troubled by, was nervous about, and I think both of them leave us with a wonderful lesson in terms of different aspects of our of Klal Yisrael's spiritual connection and roots, and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu operates the world. So it says Dazakim, there are two possible issues that concerned Yaakov greatly. Number one is the fact that Yaakov was away for 20 years. And during these 20 years, he was not able to do kibbud avim. He was away from his parents. Esav, on the other hand, was home, and he was able to do kibbud avim. And we know that he did it in a very special way. And therefore, says the Dazakim, that's what the concern was. That I don't have a slam dunk victory here, even though, yes, on a certain level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised him, but I guess, I don't know how exactly he reconciled those two things, but Lamaisi, he was concerned that maybe he was going to leave some impact, maybe not that it was going to destroy him completely, but that there was some residual damage that was going to be done in the schus of, by Esav, in the schus of his mitzvah of kibbud avim. Again, when you sort of stop and think about what the Dazakim was saying, it sounds pretty incredible. I mean, we like to look at things sort of in the big picture, in the totality of things. Well, the totality of things, Esav was a Rasha, and Yaakov was a tzaddik, and that should, in most cases, sort of give you the end of the story. There's a battle between good and evil, and good is going to win over evil. What's that? Is that Yaakov is concerned. He didn't know that overall Esav was involved in the worst averas. They say he was Gila Raya, Shvicha Zaman, Avodah Zarah, all part of Esav's repertoire. So okay, Shkoyach, he had kibbud avim, but that's a reason for Yaakov to be afraid. A similar idea by Moshe Rabbeinu with Og Melech HaBasha, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to say, don't be afraid of Og. Moshe needs to be afraid of Og. Moshe has already done everything that you can possibly imagine that a human being can do in this world, and certainly his relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu was unparalleled. And what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu needing to give him some support to say, don't be afraid. You're going to win the battle. You're going to beat Og Melech HaBasha. What's the idea? And there too, the Rashi says, because of the schus that Og had in saving Lot. He was the one who he told Avram Avinu that Lot was being held captive, and if Avram saved his nephew, and was able to reconnect him back to his family. So in that schus that he did a favor to Avram Avinu, Moshe was afraid. The same idea, the same question. Like, what's he afraid about? Okay, shkoyach, he did one good thing. Like, what? Therefore, why should that be a source of concern? what we see here, really a powerful lesson, and really one that sort of demands that we sort of slow down life instead of sort of looking at the big picture, sort of saying, well, I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy. Either we get down on ourselves because I'm not doing what I need to do, or maybe we get overly smug because we feel we're basically good people. But the power of the individual act seems to be so significant in the overall scheme of things that maybe we don't know what's going up in Shemayim, what happens after 120 years. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's department. But clearly, you see that every single act could have such significance, have such power that one particular mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim, or even one particular act of an Og Melech HaBashan helping out Avram Avinu could have such schus, such power that it could stand up generations later. It could stand up to a Yaakov Avinu. It's at this against the Yaakov Avinu at a critical point, even though certainly Esav was completely dwarfed by Yaakov in terms of his status, in terms of his level of who he was, but that doesn't change the fact that a certain schus could serve in an incredible way to make a difference. And therefore, I think, in terms of situations that come up, when we have an opportunity to extend ourselves and do something that's special, to do a mitzvah, we shouldn't say, well, either I don't need it, it's not a big deal, I'm a good enough guy as it is, or maybe I'm so rotten it's not going to make a difference. I mean, that whole idea of sort of, trying to sum up things and determine based on that somehow giving us either, an apathetic view or an overly smug view doesn't hold up. When you see the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with the world, every single act becomes so significant. The second answer of the Das HaKedim is he says is the fact that during all those years, those 20 years, Yaakov Avinu was in Chutz La'aretz and Esav was in Eretz Yisrael. Also an astounding answer. So there's shkayach. One person's in Eretz Yisrael, one person's in Chutz La'aretz, but what was one person doing in Eretz Yisrael? He was doing Averis in Eretz Yisrael, and Yaakov was in Chutz La'aretz, and he was building the Shiftei Kah. He was preparing his whole future life, and he needed to go. He was sent away by his mother. He did the right thing and going away. So because of that, because one person lives in Chutz La'aretz, one person lives in Eretz Yisrael. So again, it's a similar idea, but again, on a sort of a different plane in terms of just sort of focusing on Eretz Yisrael and the power of the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. The fact that you stayed in Eretz Yisrael and you breathed the air and you walked the streets and whatever you did, you did in the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. So while on the one hand, yes, obviously an Aveir in Eretz Yisrael is probably a worse Aveira, granted, but Lamaisa, anything that he did in Eretz Yisrael, that itself is a big schus. And that's another dimension of, Yaakov not sort of knowing where these chusim are going to rear their head. Where is this going to play a role? Is this going to be enough to give Esav a victory over me, even on some level? Maybe not in a total level, but on some level. And so again, it just reinforces our point that we tend to, again, look at the big picture, but in general about a mitzvah, and in particular about Eretz Yisrael, we're living in a world. Yes, there are justifications for us to not be in Eretz Yisrael, and obviously there are factors, but for us not to appreciate it, not to focus on the schus of being in Eretz Yisrael, of living in Eretz Yisrael, of even just breathing and walking the streets of Eretz Yisrael. These are all things that Chazal say are tremendous chusim. And again, while everybody's got to make their own decisions in life, but at least a recognition of the schus of being in Eretz Yisrael, if that could serve Esav to the point where it could inculcate fear and develop fear in Yaakov. A year of Yaakov Ma'id, he was very afraid because I was in Chutz La'aretz. You see how important every mitzvah is. You see how important Eretz Yisrael is. One last point that interesting in both these calculations, the 14 years in Shem V'Ever were not calculated. And that just reinforces and reminds us of the fact that, in other words, even though he was away for 34 years, he spent 14 years in Shem V'Ever, that doesn't count as far as his lack of kibbud av v'eim. And that doesn't seem to be in the calculation of him being away from Eretz Yisrael. Or maybe Shem V'Ever, he wasn't Eretz Yisrael, but certainly on the first answer, he says, Das HaKedim says he didn't do kibbud av v'eim for 20 years. Well, he didn't do kibbud av v'eim for 34 years. Teretz is the schus of Torah, even though you're away from your parents, and even though you can't do kibbud av v'eim, but if you're learning Torah and you're taking advantage of the time to to develop yourself in Torah. That chus of Talmud Torah is so great. It so dwarfs almost everything else that it didn't count in the calculation of the aspect of kibbud av v'em. Something that certainly we should use as a great impetus for us to focus as much on Torah as possible. Have a good Shabbos.